Hello and welcome to the Manage Self Lead Others podcast, mainly for experienced and aspiring people managers. I'm your host, Nina Sunday, and this is the show to help you explore ways to become the best version of yourself at work as a manager. Each episode, you'll hear from some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share your passion to elevate and transform team culture. They'll share insights in self-leadership and leading others. Together, we can make workplace culture better. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others. Recognized by Thinkers 360 as one of the top 20 thought leaders in the future of work, change, and culture, Laura Goodrich is author of Seeing Red Cars, Driving Yourself, Your Team and Your Organization to a Positive Future, which Forbes magazine labeled as a must-read for leaders. Laura is founder of GWT Next, whose 90-day hybrid coaching process and programs, which include coaching, cinematic microlearning programs, leverage filmmaking, storytelling and accountability to create transformation for organizations. Welcome, Laura.
I think that something that would be important for us to talk about is how a very small percentage of leaders and organizations see this time as a time to innovate and to change, and even a smaller percentage recognize that they're going to have to put an effort to reconstructing the social and emotional health of the team after everything that we've been through.
Yes. Are you suggesting that managers are underestimating the impact on the mental health of their team?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's a global problem.
It's a global problem. There's been a tremendous emphasis on business continuity, and lo and behold, it's working. Business continuity is working. But people put their head down and really worked hard to enable that, and have sustained stress for an uncertainty for a long period of time. And we did a survey actually with Pear, and we found with 5,000 leaders, and we asked them what were their thoughts about the social and emotional health of their team, and it was like nothing. Literally, it didn't even register in the low range.
They're not even asking the question.
They don't think it's an issue.
Well, hello.
Yeah.
Are they having one-on-ones with their people?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, that's what we built into the process. So what I have been thinking about since all of this has come out, it's really this combination of my work and observation of humans in a change dynamic environment. And then I spent 2 years working as an advanced trained crisis counselor. And I experienced a lot of very, very difficult things. But one of the things that I came to recognize is that people are quite heroic in crisis. Right. It is after the crisis when, things really come unraveled. And that's what we're seeing now.
Because it's been the surge to cope with the crisis came on board, and people met that crisis, but now it's been sustained now for 18 months.
Yes.
And it gets to a point. Yeah, it gets to a point where people, just can't continue in the same fashion.
Right. And it's sustained. And now we've got, other stressors that are coming up at the moment in many parts or different parts of the world, that it started to feel like, okay, this is now getting better. Now, now the story is changing. And so it's a resurgence of that stress. And so the point that we are having conversations about is that it's really critical to reconstruct that social and emotional health of the team, be having the conversations about the well-being of team members, reconnect with them in non-business continuity ways, in the way that we used to socially, and then give them the opportunity to connect with peers, similarly, and many of them aren't any longer, aren't in the, enough to fulfill that, that relationship side that is, that was richer before.
So, Laura, we're talking now about teams that are working remotely from home, or teams that are returning back to the office, or a bit of both?
A bit of both, because obviously there is both that is going on. And, there is a lot of stress going back to the office. And there is a dissension. So that when we look at and talk about the phases of crisis, the first phase is the hero phase. And we of course looked at our frontline workers, and we could see indeed that they were heroes. Though I would argue anyone in a leadership role was a hero in what was accomplished in a very, very quick period of time. And then once we got the technology figured out and everything, then we were like, then it's kind of a honeymoon. It's like, look at us. We can do this. Look, this is really, it's like a honeymoon. As one executive said to me, she said, my adult children are home. We happen to really love one another. It's just fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then several months later, when I spoke with her, she said, well, our neighbor has done a full reconstruction on their home. And that means that there is, workers all the time, and there is noise constantly. They cut, our lines on several occasions, so I didn't have Wi-Fi. My adult son walked through my office shirtless in his boxer shorts when I was running the most important meeting, of my career. So now she's in the dissensions phase. It's not so pretty anymore, right? She's in that place of frustration, and a lot of people were in that place of frustration, though they didn't air that frustration to their organizations because they felt like there was vulnerability with their work. And so they stamped that down, held that in. And so the next phase after dissension is reconstruction. And so our survey told us in very, very simple terms that the vast majority of leaders are circumventing that phase altogether. They're just plowing right past it, and they believe that they can. And in so doing, we believe that they're not going to be able to reap the final phase that we have added to it, which is the Renaissance phase. And if it is a time of extraordinary opportunity and, a lot of innovation and a lot of change, but if that time isn't placed into reconstructing, get that as a solid foundation on which to build what's next and to innovate in different ways. Well, I guess a simple thing to say is that the ones that do that will, be way ahead of those that don't.
Well, Laura, there seems to be a trend globally that individual contributors, not the managers, but the people who the managers lead, there's a high percentage of proactively looking for another job, new work, and this will cause the most incredible talent drain. And do you think managers are not even considering this?
Well, I think that they are considering this. What they're not considering is the why behind it, right? The why. What brings us to what they're now describing as the Great Resignation, right? The high percentage of individuals that have spruced up their resumes and are engaging in conversations with people in their network, people that they worked with in the past, and they're getting some very exciting opportunities. And the other piece that they're doing is considering changing industries, changing roles. They're looking at what they do and they're saying, I could take that and I could put it in a different area. And that would be kind of interesting to do something different. So there's not only are there a lot of people that are in the wind, sort of looking for opportunities, I think that they're opening their minds to different roles.
That's right. And a lot of them have searched inside themselves saying, what do I really want to do? Right. And so, I mean, I would find that, like, even before I had my own business, I would find every holidays, I'd be thinking of all the new things I could be doing in the coming year, to make my life better or to follow my passion. And COVID has given people a chance to do that as well.
Right.
And it could
Right.
be
So,
fewer nights away from home, more time with their family.
well, that's the other thing. I think that people really want to be intentional in how they design their lives. And
that's it.
there is not so much of here's my work and here's my life. It's here's my life. And I'm looking at designing that they're not separate.
Laura, you've nailed it. That's it. That's absolutely it. You've got it.
Right. And so what I would say is that there are leaders and organizations that are going to do really well through this. That's because right. They're dialed in and they're aware of the fact that they really need to attend to their leaders and their employees, really connect with them on a personal level and demonstrate to them that they are first. And, there's such a strong emphasis on customer first. And sometimes you see that it's like customer is first. Well, I mean, the resounding message with that is employee is not first. And, there's a lot of people that are looking for an organization that really does elevate their role with the customer, but they see their role with the employee as equally important and not so separated. And they want to work with an organization that shows that sense of caring and that trust. So here's an example. I had early on had a conversation with the CEO, and he said, as soon as COVID is over, we'll mandate that everybody come back. And I said, right. Did you hear that? And he said, what? And I said, that's the sound of your competition doing a triple summy off of their desk, because they are delighted to hear you say that, because they're going to be very interested in your best employees. And if they know that you're operating with that mentality, that's exactly what they're going to do, is go and find your most innovative, forward-leaning employees. Because and then the next time he was like, well, maybe we'll have some flexibility. One of the things I said, what is it? What's the trouble here? And he's like, well, we can't get a hold of people and it delays, the process. Well, I'm like, is that the people or is that the process? Because if you've got a method and an expectation for how readily you can connect with people and, get a question answered or bring people into a dialogue and conversation, that's the other thing that, great organizations have done. They've established, okay, how do we do this so that we can keep that continuity going? And, nobody wants to say, well, we can't get a hold of Nina, so we need to delay this for, until we can. I mean, we do have to be able to make sure that we can keep things going. So a lot of times it's a matter of establishing the expectations. It's one of those things where people think, well, okay, so the way we solve this is we bring everyone into the office and that way we can see them, right? And now we feel like we've solved it. I don't know that we've solved anything. There have been employees that have been playing games on their computers since the beginning of time. There are employees that, did not have a high degree of productivity, and you saw them every day.
And I dare say some of their best people would be busy in meetings or out of office client meetings. So I dare say if they look back pre-COVID, maybe people were just as unable to be contacted as amid COVID,
Well, it's interesting that you mention it because I remember walking through a very large office building in a metropolitan area literally 5 years ago, and it was like a ghost town. I was counting the number of people that were at their desks, and I thought to myself, this is very expensive real estate. How can these organizations continue to pay what they're paying for this real estate when, they have so many people on the road? That was a causation back then, is they had a lot of people on the road. But many now are examining that cost against benefit. And we have done some work with an architecture firm, and they're going into organizations and redesigning the space
That's right. This is happening in Australia. It's happening globally.
Yes.
Mm.
So they're making it into a place that actually fosters innovation, creativity,
Mm.
actual connection, people with people. I mean, I always show a picture of a room of people in their cubicles.
Yeah.
And I say, if you think this fostered innovation before, or your culture, you're dreadfully wrong, because it
That's
did
right.
not foster your culture. And it's interesting, because if we look at sales organizations who have worked remotely since the beginning of time, most salespeople are remote workers and were since the beginning of time.
True.
And the question that you would ask is, do they have a sense of the culture of the organization that they work for? Yes, they have to. They couldn't sell for it if they didn't have a very strong sense of the culture, not just the products, but the culture of the organization. They are the face of the organization showing that. And they've long demonstrated that culture, it doesn't take place when you're in the office. It's about how you communicate with people. It's about what has greatest meaning to the organization and to you. It is all of those things. It's not where you sit in a desk.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're very much involved in the learning and development side of things as well, aren't you, Laura?
Well, what we do is we design programs to help leaders and employees more effectively change, transform, or innovate.
Right.
And those programs are brought into organization in various ways. It's not uncommon that we come in with, let's say, a chief operations officer, a division president. And really the criteria of beginning the conversation is a leader that has an initiative that's a priority. And they are the champion of that. And that's where our conversation often begins. And, they really serve as the leader. And often there is a cohort group of other leaders that are charged with various aspects of those initiatives. And so that is often where we make that connection, or where our partners connect with our organizations.
And you're a big fan of microlearning as opposed to
Yes.
training days?
I am, but not just microlearning alone. And I'd love to share with you where this began, because it was really, and I think all of us in our lives have those moments of epiphany. And mine was, I was on a plane flying over the beautiful red mountains of Utah. And if you've ever seen the mountains in Utah, you'll appreciate the inspiration that they create. And as I was flying over those mountains in a plane, I thought to myself, we spend billions of dollars on training, and it is largely ineffective. It does not stick.
How do stop losses work on Kraken? Let's say I have a birthday party on Wednesday night, but an important meeting Thursday morning. So Sensible Me pre-books a taxi for 10 p.m. with alerts. Voila! I won't be getting carried away and staying out till 2. That's stop loss orders on Kraken, an easy way to plan ahead. Go to kraken.com and see what crypto can be. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Interactive Inc., PWI, DBA Kraken. View PWI's disclosures at kraken.com/legal/disclosures.
Ask people what they remember about even a program that they liked a week later, and they will not be able to tell you specific things about it. And yet we keep throwing money at that process. And in that moment, I said, we could do better. I mean, we have tools that we can do better. So I really looked at and was thinking about several things. One is that as a coach, if I would work with a leader over the course of time and create that accountability, lo and behold, that you'd see them developing gains that were very different than, let's say, if other people that might be in a training program. And by the way, I've done hundreds upon hundreds of hours of training programs. And so I'll be the first to say that I know that when they stand alone, that they are highly ineffective and that we can do better.
It's that's a little disappointing, isn't it?
Well, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm saying as long as we don't stop there when we do the training, right? As long as we don't stop there. And that's what often, we start and we stop in one spot and we don't do anything else. So I knew that by way of coaching and spacing that experience over time and creating that accountability where people are taking action, you'd see real change. And then I knew if I worked with a small group together and they were figuring out how to lead change or how to bring a new innovation in or solve the challenges that they faced, lo and behold, there were a lot of answers in that group when they were working together, again, over the course of time. And then the question that always came up to us is, how do we deepen this learning and keep it going? And that's when we started to create microlearning. How do we deepen that learning and keep it going? So our microlearning is not learning as such, we're storytellers. And so ours are all based on story and narrative.
Our stories, they stick. And in fact, whenever I've presented, it's the stories that people remember, and you use stories to illustrate a point, but people can hang their memory of the key principles on the stories that you tell. So it sounds like you're doing something similar.
Yes, that's what we do. And that's how it began, Nina, because I was a storyteller in my coaching. I use storytelling. And in my training, I use storytelling. In my conversations at a cocktail party, I use storytelling. Love using stories. And my business partner told stories from behind the lens. And so a dozen years ago, we came together and began telling stories together. And to deepen that learning and to make it memorable, as you know. And so we're always looking for stories and how we can space those stories. Now imagine spacing the stories in with the coaching and the cohort group. Now we've got leaders taking actions and we're putting stories in that path.
So where do you find your stories? Is it, say you're working with a client, they'll tell you their stories and you illustrate those, or you've already got a bank of stories that you then use?
When we design a process where we look at the process and we ask questions, what are some of the obstacles that will be encountered? What's a story that could help us uncover those obstacles?
Does that mean like a case study or?
Here's an example.
Yeah,
one of the stories that the example is that we were designing a number of programs, and it was about change. And so we know that people are very resistant to change, and it could be anything, let's say a new technology. So we said we need to tell a story that provides perspective on this change that they're being asked to make. So the story that we told is a story of a musician named Billy McLaughlin. And Billy was very successful acoustic guitarist. He traveled the world and he was a solo guitarist. So he was in front of an audience, and all of a sudden, without warning, the two fingers on his dominant hand began to curl. And it took a long period of time to discern what his malady was. But ultimately, they found that it was a condition called focal dystonia. And the doctors told him to walk away from his career, that it would be no longer. And he said to himself, well, I don't have the use on my right hand. I am fully functional on my left. And he closed himself in a room and he taught himself how to play the guitar on his non-dominant side. And if you've ever tried to do anything on your non-dominant side, you recognize the task that he had before him. But in this story, he tells of this excruciating process that ultimately brought him to a positive place. And it's a story that tends to stir emotions with people, but that gives you an example. So a lot of times they are not work-related stories. They are people stories. They're stories that we encounter in our lives, and stories of great people. So we have some folks that help us find them. We also go out and we ask, we say, we're looking for a story that does this. Does anyone have one? A lot of times people have stories. So
really interesting.
Yes. I mean, we have a bounty of them we've not produced yet that we would love to.
Well, I guess there's no shortage of stories in this world. And
right.
as the world changes and revolves, I mean, more stories are being created, and we all need fresh stories too, because
Right.
it's the news stories that kind of capture us. We're sort of coming to the end of our conversation, Laura, and I've been hanging on every word. It's been wonderful. So where are we? Where are we headed, and where should we be?
Well, we're at a place where there's just a small percentage of leaders and organizations that recognize that they're going to have to do some work to rebuild and reconstruct their teams. But those that do, and those that see that that will be then the foundation to change and innovate in ways that are extremely difficult for us to anticipate. But there are many of these emerging technologies that are now blossoming. They've been like a bud of a flower for a while, but they are now blossoming and opening up, and will demonstrate they will disrupt roles. They will undeniably disrupt roles, permanently disrupt roles. But we believe that there will be a disproportionate amount of opportunity that will exist. That innovation, and just think of all of the things that came about, all of the industries that supported an automobile. And as automobiles began, and just think of all the related industries that now exist, and then imagine that in many, many other sectors. So rather than operating in a place of fear, operate in a place of intention, and really, really take care of that team and the leaders, and really think about building that foundation so that you can create what's next. And I think what's next will be terribly exciting.
Well, if it's very interesting, you draw a parallel with the automobile industry, because if you think about it, when Henry Ford created the manufacturing line, it was at a time when small specialist groups would create one car all together all at once.
Yes.
It was terribly expensive. And then Henry Ford just reinvented the whole process and made it possible to churn out car after car after car, because the people specialized in their own niche area of the conveyor belt, if you like.
Yes.
The
Yes.
production line. So in a sense, because of the transformation of the world through the internet and this connectivity, we're only, like, we're now at 100 years after the motor car. We're only 20 years into the internet, really. So
right.
if we can only imagine what the next 80 years is going to bring us, it's going to be extraordinary, perhaps even living on other planets. It's unbelievable what's coming.
It is in so many ways very difficult to envision, right? And because we can't vision it, we don't really know what that could possibly be like. But the bottom line is, I believe more opportunity than threat, particularly for those that are willing, able to change, learn new things. Many of these new skills will take time, just like the story of Billy McLaughlin, who had to close himself in the room to teach himself how to play on the non-dominant side. It was a very enduring process, and we'll have to, at the very stage when a lot of people will just as soon stick with what they've got, we'll have to learn some new things that will take effort. And I always say sometimes we don't know we need change when we need it, because I've yet to come across anyone that's learned something new that isn't invigorated by the fact that they conquered and learned something new.
And one final question. Some of the people that I've interviewed in this podcast going back, they've been involved in cultures where they gave a name to the culture that was about focusing on people, like Accor Hospitality Group focus on having a heartist culture, and they state it. Our culture is heartist. UKG, the Ultimate Kronos Group, they search for deeper meaning, and they have a name for their culture, and these organizations are more intentional. Is that one way that, say, tomorrow a manager or a senior leader could say, let's give our our focus on culture, a name, and let's put our energy behind that. Is that one pathway forward?
I think it's a great starting place. It's a great starting place, and then really define the words that, would encompass that. But the question that I often ask is, when they come to us, they'll say, here is that, that overarching message, and here are our words. And I'll say to them, well, how are your words doing? Because words don't do so well when they're just words. And that there again is an opportunity to tell stories. And that's something that we help organizations also do is, all right, so here's a word. Let's go find someone that exemplifies this in your organization, someone that is trusted and someone that others care about. And this is not rank. This is not based upon role. It's based upon trust. And share those stories. So that's a powerful way. Yes, define what that means. What is your culture? What do you need it and want it to be? Identify the words that are critical to it, and then use story as a means by which to foster that, that behavior, because you need to see behavior change. And we always say, stories and peer influence that doesn't stop at 16. Right? That forever we've been influenced by others. We've been, and that's a powerful way to do that.
Well, Laura, it's been fascinating doing this deep dive into using stories to inspire change. Do you work with people all around the world, or just in the United States, or how do people work with you?
We have partners all around the world. We're really focused on producing these programs, designing processes to implement them. And we are always looking for partners, consulting firms or consultancies that are working with clients, and then what they use our programs and our process as a part of their larger consulting offer. So it's a piece of their larger, but the beauty is that everything that we do can be virtual. And that's what we've always done. And so we've learned a lot of lessons in 12 years of doing that, right? And we've learned them the hard way. And that's some of the things that are difficult to know in the beginning.
Absolutely. Well, and how can people find you, Laura?
Well, definitely LinkedIn is a great place to begin, because that's dynamic and it's ongoing. So connect with me on LinkedIn. GWT Next is our website, and Laura at GWT Next for an email. But let's start off at LinkedIn, because that's dynamic and it's a way where we can begin with a conversation.
Laura Goodrich, it's been fascinating speaking with you today, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. It's lovely being with you.
Today, we've been speaking with Laura Goodrich on the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast. I'm your host, Nina Sunday. Remember to subscribe and listen to Manage Self, Lead Others wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, ciao for now.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.